I was enjoying morning coffee on my grandfather's 1923 cabin porch, fishing rod in hand, over the lake with my 15-year-old son Tyler. Then a SWAT team explodes from the trees, 8 officers in full gear, rifles up, yelling, "Hands up! Get down!" They smash Grandpa's handmade antique door and slam me face first to the floor, zip-tying my wrists until blood drips. Tyler screams, hiding under the table in terror, standing there filming it all on her phone. HOA President Bethany Harwick, the Karen who's terrorized us for months with fake violations and lawsuits, all to steal our family cabin for her beautification project. She even filed a bogus report claiming I run a meth lab. What she doesn't know, her husband David works directly under me. I'm his boss. Today, this entitled busybody is about to face real consequences for swatting her boss's family. What would you do if an HOA Karen turned the police on your kid and your heritage? 3 hours in handcuffs while they searched for a meth lab that existed only in Bethany Harwick's twisted imagination. When Officer Reynolds finally released me, Tyler was shaking behind our kitchen table. The acrid smell of gunpowder residue mixed with spilled coffee and my son's fear sweat. My 15-year-old had just watched his father arrested at gunpoint over morning fishing. "Mr. Zane, I'm sorry," Reynolds handed back my fishing license. The report claimed active drug manufacturing with weapons. Obviously, that's not what we found. Through our window, I spotted Bethany on her glass deck across Pine Lake, phone pressed to her ear, designer workout clothes perfect at 10 a.m. Her animated gestures screamed victory, probably posting her community safety win on social media. "There's still an ongoing investigation," Reynolds warned quietly. "Be careful. This cabin meant everything to our family. My grandfather built it in 1923 after WWI, hand-carving every beam with tools still hanging in our workshop. As senior construction manager at Pinnacle Regional Industries, I appreciated real craftsmanship. When my divorce finalized, this became Tyler's sanctuary, 3 protected acres of family history. But Pine Lake had become a battlefield between old fishing families and McMansion newcomers who formed an HOA in 1987. Their mission? Property standards, code for eliminating anyone not matching their country club vision. Bethany Harwick, 48, real estate background, embodied everything wrong with the takeover. 2 years as HOA president had turned her into a neighborhood dictator who approached community management like a corporate raid, ruthless, entitled, obsessed with property values over people's lives. "Are they coming back?" Tyler whispered. I touched grandfather's smooth hand-carved table. "Not if I can help it." And her harassment started 6 months ago with friendly suggestions about our dated appearance. When I declined, she escalated to violation notices with legal letterhead. Here's what these people never researched. Our property predates their HOA by 64 years. Legal knowledge. Nugget number 1. Grandfather clauses protect pre-existing property rights from retroactive HOA regulations. Always research your property's complete legal history before any association claims authority over structures built before formation. Takeaway. Your property's age is your strongest legal shield against HOA overreach. We pay voluntary dues as good neighbors, but we're exempt from most rules through constitutional grandfather clause protection. Bethany either didn't understand this or didn't care about property rights. She'd mentioned her husband David, some construction worker supporting her beautification crusade. I felt sorry for whoever married that level of entitlement. The metallic taste of adrenaline lingered while Tyler jumped at every passing car. No kid should fear some HOA president who thinks she owns the neighborhood. I started documenting everything. Photos of our damaged door, screenshots of false reports, timestamps of her cameras trained on our property. Every attack would be recorded in high definition. The texture of grandfather's weathered wood reminded me why this place mattered. 4 generations had found peace here, learning patience and strategy from these walls. My grandfather survived trench warfare by staying calm under pressure. My father built a successful carpentry business through careful planning. Now it was my turn to protect our legacy. "What did Grandpa always say about bullies?" I asked Tyler. "Don't become one, just be smarter." Exactly. Bethany thought today's raid was checkmate. She didn't realize every escalation gave me more ammunition for my counterattack. The evening loons called across darkening water, same peaceful sounds grandfather heard claiming this land. Their haunting melody mixed with the distant hum of Bethany's air conditioning units, creating an odd soundtrack of natural beauty versus artificial perfection. But watching her pace that deck, still celebrating on her phone, I noticed a troubling pattern. She somehow knew exactly when Tyler visited, when we'd be most vulnerable to maximum humiliation. Her timing was too perfect, too coordinated. Someone was feeding her detailed inside information about my personal schedule. Someone who knew my work patterns, my custody arrangements, my weekend plans. Time to discover who that traitor was. And once I found them, this little harassment campaign was about to become very expensive for everyone involved. 2 days after the SWAT raid, a thick legal envelope was taped to my cabin door. Inside, a cease and desist from Henderson and Associates Legal Services. Sounded impressive until I Googled them. Strip mall office next to a payday loan shop. The letter claimed my dock, generator, and fire pit violated community standards and demanded immediate removal or face swift legal consequences. Fancy letterhead, but about as legally binding as a grocery receipt. "Can she really do this?" Tyler asked, voice still shaky from weekend trauma. "Not legally, but she's banking on us being too scared or broke to fight back. Classic rich person warfare, bury opponents in legal fees until they surrender." I remembered my divorce attorney's advice. Paper beats bluster every time. Time to gather some paper. The county courthouse basement reeked of musty records and broken dreams, but held treasure, our original 1923 property deed. Yellowed pages clearly showed grandfather's boundaries, every structure predating any HOA by 60 years. Back home, Tyler helped photograph every family structure with timestamps. "Dad, look at this craftsmanship," he said, running fingers along grandfather's hand-carved porch railings. "No way some strip mall lawyer beats this." Smart kid. We documented grandfather's workshop, the original stone fire pit, even the dock posts he'd sunk by hand. Tyler's methodical approach reminded me why this fight mattered. He was learning to protect what previous generations built. That evening, installing security cameras together, we heard distinctive click, click, click of designer heels on our dock. Bethany was trespassing, measuring something with a tape measure. "Excuse me," I called out, camera ready. "This is private property." She spun around, clutching her measuring tape. "I'm conducting community assessment for compliance review." "At 8 p.m. without permission? That's trespassing." Her face flushed crimson. "This waterfront belongs to the community. Your grandfather stole this land." Tyler stepped closer, fists clenched, but I steadied him. "Grandfather survived trenches by staying calm when others lost their heads. Ma'am, I have the original deed if you'd like proper documentation." She stormed off, heels clicking angrily, but she left a lipstick-stained coffee cup on our table like territorial marking. Here's where things got interesting. The next morning brought Walt with coffee and disturbing intelligence. "She's been busy," my 70-year-old neighbor said, settling into grandfather's rocking chair. "Yesterday she visited the Hendersons, Crafts, and Morettis, all newer families. Heard she's offering sob stories about declining property values." My stomach dropped. Building a coalition? Seems like it. "And Zane, there's something else. Her husband David stopped by my place asking about your work schedule. Said Bethany wanted to coordinate community improvements when you weren't busy." David. I'd heard that name but couldn't place it. Someone was definitely feeding Bethany inside information about my life. That afternoon proved Walt right. Bethany appeared at my door with 3 neighbors I barely recognized. The McMansion crowd from the lake's east side. "Marcus, we need to discuss your property's impact on community standards," she announced, clipboard in hand. "These concerned residents have signed a petition requesting immediate compliance action." Behind her, the Hendersons and Crafts nodded nervously while Mrs. Moretti avoided eye contact. They'd clearly been fed some story about my violations hurting their investments. I invited them onto the porch, pulling out my documentation. "Happy to show everyone the legal status of every structure here." "Legal technicalities don't matter when property values are declining," Bethany snapped. "Sometimes community good requires individual sacrifice." The audacity was breathtaking. She wanted me to sacrifice my family's heritage for her profit margins. "Bethany," I said calmly, "every structure here predates your HOA by 60 years. We have constitutional grandfather clause protection that no petition can override." The other neighbors looked confused. Clearly they hadn't been told about my legal protections. Mrs. Moretti actually seemed relieved. We'll see what the courts decide, Bethany huffed, gathering her recruits for retreat. But I noticed something crucial. She kept checking her phone, like she was coordinating with someone, and when I mentioned working late tomorrow, she made a note. That evening, Tyler and I sat on the dock watching sunset paint the lake golden. The peaceful loons called across water while Bethany's air conditioning hummed artificially in the distance. Dad, who do you think is telling her our business? Someone who knows my work schedule, custody arrangements, everything personal. I skipped a stone across the darkening water. Someone who has access to information they shouldn't. The name David kept nagging at me. Something familiar about it, but I couldn't connect the dots yet. What I did know was this. Bethany had recruited her coalition, but she'd also shown her hand. This wasn't about community standards. It was about forcing out families who wouldn't sell. Time to start building my own coalition, and maybe figure out who David was before he caused more damage. The second false police report hit during Tyler's quiet homework session on our dock. We were sharing afternoon cookies when 2 squad cars screamed up our drive, lights blazing like we were running a cartel operation. Noise complaint, Officer Martinez explained sheepishly. Report claims loud music, shouting, possible underage drinking party. I gestured at our peaceful scene. Tyler with algebra textbook, me with coffee, only sound being gentle water lapping dock posts. Does this look like a party? Martinez actually blushed. Sir, I respond to all calls. Obviously, there's no violation here. So, across the lake, Bethany stood on her deck with binoculars, phone pressed to ear, watching our humiliation like premium entertainment. That's when her real strategy clicked. She wasn't just harassing us. She was weaponizing law enforcement itself, turning our protectors into instruments of intimidation. The pattern crystallized over 2 brutal weeks. Police visits always targeted our quietest family moments. Tyler's study time, morning fishing, peaceful dinners. Bethany somehow knew exactly when to maximize trauma and humiliation. Dad, I don't want friends over anymore, Tyler confessed after the 4th false report, his voice cracking. What if police show up while they're here? The metallic taste of helpless rage coated my mouth. No kid should fear having friends visit because some psycho neighbor weaponizes emergency services. But construction management had taught me systematic problem solving. I started treating Bethany like any problematic contractor. Document everything, build relationships, gather evidence. After each visit, I invited officers for coffee and context. Officer Reynolds, a decent guy with teenage kids, became genuinely sympathetic once he understood our situation. Mr. Zane, I've done this 20 years, Reynolds said, accepting his 3rd coffee that week. False reports are serious. Document everything, dates, times, badge numbers, incident reports. This builds toward criminal harassment charges. I pulled out a composition notebook, creating detailed logs, date, time, responding officer, incident number, Tyler's emotional state, Bethany's visible surveillance during each call. My divorce attorney's voice echoed in my memory. Documentation beats emotion in every legal proceeding. Here's where the mini twist hit. During the 5th false report, Bethany escalated to claiming drug deals at our dock during Tyler's birthday prep. That's a serious accusation, Reynolds told me privately, but I've responded here 5 times with 0 evidence. At some point, false reports become criminal harassment. He handed me incident report copies, each stamped unfounded in red letters. Beautiful ammunition for my growing case file, but the timing precision still nagged at me. These calls always came when Bethany somehow knew we'd be having peaceful family time. Exactly when sirens would inflict maximum emotional damage. Reynolds, how does she know when to call? Her timing seems impossibly coordinated. His frown deepened. That's unusual. Most harassment calls are random. These feel strategically planned. That evening, Tyler and I sat on grandfather's porch swing, familiar wood creaking while loons called across darkening water. The sharp scent of pine needles mixed with lake moisture, creating that peaceful aroma that made this sanctuary worth fighting for. Tyler, have you mentioned our plans to anyone? School friends, social media posts, anything reaching back to Bethany? He shook his head. Dad, I barely post anymore. But there was one weird thing. Mrs. Peterson asked detailed questions about our fishing schedule. Mrs. Peterson, 2 houses down, seemed harmless enough, but information flows in unexpected directions. What exactly did she ask? When we usually come up if we have regular fishing times. Said her husband David works construction and wondered about lake access for his crew. David. That name again, floating around the edges of this harassment campaign like smoke I couldn't quite grab. David Peterson? I think so. She mentioned he knows the area from job sites. Something cold settled in my stomach, but I couldn't identify why that name felt significant. The next morning brought nuclear escalation. Bethany filed formal complaints with County Sheriff's Department claiming our repeated violations and suspicious activities required ongoing investigation. Sheriff's Deputy Collins arrived with paperwork and stern expressions that melted once he assessed our actual situation. "Mr. Zane, straight talk," Collins said, settling into our kitchen. 6 reports in 2 weeks is more than some crack houses generate. Either you're running the world's quietest criminal operation, or someone's playing dangerous games with emergency services. Fresh coffee mixed with Collins's honest assessment, giving me first real hope in weeks. Deputy, every report is completely fabricated. We have documented proof of peaceful activities, officer statements confirming no violations, and evidence of caller's location during each incident. Collins nodded grimly. Keep documenting. False police reports are misdemeanors, but systematic false reports become felony harassment. We're building a case whether she realizes it or not. Walking him to his patrol car, I spotted movement across the lake. Bethany pacing her deck, phone glued to ear, gesturing frantically like she was arguing with someone with intimate knowledge of my family's schedule and vulnerable moments. David Peterson, construction worker with lake access needs. Time to figure out exactly how much this David knew about my personal life. I woke Monday morning to find grandfather's century-old canoe floating upside down 50 yards offshore. Someone had cut our dock chains with bolt cutters, leaving jagged metal edges that could have seriously injured Tyler if he'd discovered them in darkness. The sight of that hand-carved canoe bobbing helplessly hit like a physical blow. Grandfather had shaped those gunnels himself, teaching 3 generations to fish from those exact seats. Now it drifted toward rocky shoreline like discarded garbage. Tyler helped me wade out to retrieve it, both of us silent while checking for damage. The hull was intact, but the violation cut deeper than any scratch could. This wasn't random vandalism. Someone had deliberately targeted our most sacred family heirloom. Dad, who would do this? Tyler's voice trembled with hurt confusion. Someone who wants us afraid in our own sanctuary. Back on shore, I documented everything. Severed chains, precise cut marks, timestamps showing our security cameras mysteriously malfunctioning. Both dock-facing cameras had been spray-painted black between midnight and dawn. The acrid scent of fresh paint mixed with morning coffee and rising anger. Whoever did this knew exactly where our surveillance equipment was positioned. That afternoon brought wave 2. Our fire pit stones had been rearranged into what looked like occult symbols, clearly designed to trigger religious complaints from other residents. Trash was scattered around the formation to suggest we'd been hosting satanic rituals. The psychological warfare was getting sophisticated. Walt arrived within minutes of my call, surveying damage with experienced eyes that had seen decades of lake community drama. "Marcus, this is escalating dangerously," he said, kneeling beside vandalized stones. "Whoever's doing this has studied your property closely. Camera positions, security gaps, family routines. Any witnesses? Saw an unfamiliar pickup around 5 a.m. Work truck, maybe landscaping or construction crew." Construction. That word kept circling around David Peterson's mysterious presence in our harassment timeline. Here's where everything changed. Wednesday morning, I caught them red-handed. Trail cameras hidden in surrounding trees captured everything. A 3-man landscaping crew was following detailed written instructions, systematically vandalizing specific property areas. The crew leader kept consulting papers and pointing toward different targets like he was following a military operation plan. I confronted him as he scattered more debris near our family memorial garden. "What exactly are you doing on my property?" He jumped like he'd touched live wire, nearly dropping his trash bag. "Oh, maintenance work, property management stuff." "Who hired you?" Genuine discomfort crossed his face as he glanced toward his truck where 2 nervous coworkers waited. "Look, man, we just follow orders. David Harwick pays us extra cash for weekend work, says there's problem properties needing addressing." David Harwick. Not Peterson. Harwick. Cold realization slid down my spine like ice water. Bethany's husband shared her last name, obviously, and he worked construction, which explained his knowledge of security systems, property layouts, everything needed to orchestrate these attacks. David Harwick hired you to vandalize my family's property? The crew leader realized his mistake. Hey, we were told this was legitimate property dispute resolution. If that's not accurate, I started recording on my phone. Repeat exactly what David Harwick instructed you to do here. Man, I don't want legal trouble. He said the property owner was violating community standards, needed encouragement to comply, paid us $200 cash to relocate stones, clean up debris, basic maintenance. Relocating stones into occult symbols is maintenance? His face went ashen. Look, we thought this was just property manager business. If this is actually illegal... 20 minutes later, I had signed statements from all 3 crew members identifying David Harwick as their employer and detailing his specific vandalism instructions. They seemed genuinely relieved to escape what they now understood was criminal conspiracy. From my construction management experience, I knew documentation like this was gold in legal proceedings. Signed witness statements with specific dates, times, and criminal instructions would destroy any harassment defense Bethany might attempt. But the biggest revelation was still coming. That evening, I researched David Harwick's employment and found shocking information. Construction supervisor at Pinnacle Regional Industries, my own company. I was literally his direct supervisor, and he'd been feeding his wife insider information about my schedule for months. Every false police report, every perfectly timed attack, every violation of our family's privacy, orchestrated by my own employee using company access and confidential knowledge. Tyler found me staring at David's personnel file, trying to process the complete betrayal. Dad, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse than a ghost, son. I've discovered our family traitor. The evening loons called across darkening water, their haunting song now carrying menace instead of peace. Tomorrow I'd face an impossible decision. Fire David immediately and risk appearing vindictive, or gather more evidence while enduring continued attacks. One thing was absolutely certain. The power dynamic in this harassment war was about to shift seismically. Bethany thought she was attacking some powerless neighbor family. She had no idea she'd been systematically terrorizing her own husband's boss for months. Time to plan her education very carefully. Monday morning in my corporate office felt like stepping into an alternate reality. David Harwick's employee file lay spread across my mahogany desk. 2 years of stellar performance reviews, on-time completions, 0 infractions. The man helping his wife terrorize my family was actually a model employee. The bitter irony tasted like cold coffee and betrayal. His personnel folder contained everything: emergency contact, Bethany Harwick, wife, insurance beneficiary details, Pine Lake address. All the evidence had been sitting in my filing cabinet while his wife orchestrated months of systematic attacks on my family. I cross-referenced David's work schedule with Bethany's harassment timeline, fingers trembling slightly as the correlation became undeniable. Every false police report happened after David heard me discuss weekend plans in staff meetings. Every vandalism attack occurred when he knew I'd be away from the cabin. The company insurance fraud alone could end his career. David claimed Pine Lake as permanent residence for coverage, but payroll showed he'd been collecting corporate housing allowance for downtown apartment, double-dipping benefits while using insider information to help his wife commit crimes. My phone buzzed. Tyler texting, "Dad, landscaping truck back across lake. Call police?" I stepped to my window, afternoon sunlight warming my face as I called him back. "Tyler, just document with photos. We're building something bigger now." "What do you mean bigger?" "I found our information leak, and son, their whole world is about to change." This discovery felt like holding a live grenade with the pin pulled. I could fire David immediately for policy violations, but that would seem vindictive. Better to gather overwhelming evidence than choose the perfect moment for maximum devastation. HR confirmed company policy was ironclad. Employees must disclose conflicts where personal relationships affect professional duties. Non-disclosure may result in immediate termination. David had never mentioned his wife was systematically harassing his direct supervisor. Worse, he'd actively participated by providing confidential information used to coordinate attacks. But here's what gnawed at me. David seemed genuinely decent at work. Quiet, professional, always helping colleagues. Was he a willing conspirator or another victim of Bethany's manipulation? The musty scent of employee files mixed with my growing anger as I planned a test. During afternoon staff meeting, I casually mentioned Tyler's 16th birthday party. Big family gathering Saturday, probably our busiest cabin weekend all summer. David's reaction was microscopic but telling. Shoulders tensed, phone appeared, fingers typing quickly. When I asked about weekend emergency availability, he pocketed the device and claimed he'd be helping wife with community projects. Community projects. The euphemism was almost insulting. Walking to my car that evening, familiar parking lot asphalt felt different under my feet. Every casual conversation with David over 2 years needed reevaluation. How many personal details had been weaponized against my family? The drive home along Pine Lake's winding road revealed Bethany's glass mansion across darkening water, no longer entitled luxury but a command center for psychological warfare. Lights blazed in every window like she was planning military operations. But I held the nuclear option now. The smooth leather of my steering wheel under my palms reminded me of grandfather's steady hands during wartime. Patient, calculated, decisive when necessary. Bethany thought she was attacking some powerless neighbor who couldn't defend against her HOA authority and legal resources. She had no clue she'd been systematically destroying her own family's financial foundation. David's career, their health insurance, mortgage payments, entire lifestyle, all dependent on the man she'd spent months trying to eliminate. The distant sound of evening loons calling across water mixed with my car's engine as strategic possibilities crystallized. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice served with surgical precision. Tomorrow, I'd begin planning the perfect revelation moment. Something public enough to maximize impact while maintaining my professional integrity. Bethany wanted power games. Time to demonstrate what actual power looked like when wielded by someone who understood consequences. Tuesday morning, I sat in my office with steaming coffee and a legal pad, orchestrating the most satisfying professional takedown of my career. The rich Colombian aroma mixed with sweet anticipation of justice finally being served. First stop, HR department. I needed comprehensive understanding of David's policy violations without revealing my hand. Sarah, hypothetical scenario, I told our HR director during coffee break. If an employee's spouse harassed their supervisor using company information, what policies apply? Her eyebrows shot up. That's oddly specific, Zane, but hypothetically, if the employee provided any insider information enabling harassment, that's immediate termination for breach of confidentiality. Failure to disclose the conflict is also immediate termination. Perfect. David was guilty on multiple counts. Next, county courthouse research on Bethany's property compliance. Mrs. Henderson, the records clerk, remembered my previous visits. More ammunition gathering? She asked with knowing smile. Thorough research on Pine Lake HOA compliance records. What I discovered was poetic justice. Bethany's glass mansion featured 3 unpermitted additions: extended deck, hot tub installation, and decorative fountain, all constructed without county approval. The woman demanding universal compliance had violated regulations for personal convenience. Wednesday brought community intelligence operations. Walt arranged breakfast meetings at Murphy's Diner with other Lake families, including Janet Wilson, the former HOA president before Bethany's hostile takeover. That woman systematically destroyed 3 families before targeting yours, Janet explained over strong coffee. Hendersons, Crafts, Moretti's, all driven away through legal harassment campaigns. How'd she remove a sitting president? Character assassination over minor bookkeeping discrepancy from years ago. Threatened criminal charges until I resigned. Janet stirred her coffee deliberately. She's been misappropriating HOA emergency funds for personal legal fees. Actual embezzlement. Hypothetically, how would someone audit HOA finances? Her smile sharpened like a blade. Any member can request detailed financial records. Board meetings are public record. County prosecutors love misappropriated community fund cases. Thursday evening required technical preparations. Using my company's professional security equipment, Tyler and I installed military-grade surveillance, night vision cameras, backup power systems, cloud storage redundancy. Every angle covered, every second recorded. From my construction management experience, I'd learned that documentation quality determines legal outcomes. Grainy footage gets dismissed. Professional recordings win cases. Dad, this seems excessive for birthday party, Tyler observed, adjusting camera angles. Son, sometimes you let enemies destroy themselves, but perfect documentation ensures justice. pine needle scent mixed with new electronics as we worked together, protecting 3 generations of family legacy with modern technology. Friday brought coordination with Officer Reynolds. I called him directly about weekend security concerns. Marcus, given the harassment pattern, we'll increase patrol frequency during your son's party, he assured me. If she escalates, we'll be ready with immediate response. Reynolds, I need you to understand something. This situation is about to change dramatically. I've discovered information that puts everything in new perspective. What kind of information? The kind that turns harassment victims into people with significant leverage. Just be prepared for possible developments. During staff meeting, I announced Tyler's celebration with theatrical enthusiasm. Big 16th birthday party Saturday. Extended family, friends, probably our loudest cabin weekend all year. David's phone materialized instantly, fingers typing frantically. His predictability was almost pitiful. After the meeting, I consulted company employment attorney about proper termination procedures. Marcus, with documented policy violations and conflicts of interest, termination is straightforward, he advised. But timing matters for legal protection. Ensure witnesses, maintain professionalism, document everything. That evening, Tyler and I sat on grandfather's porch swing, watching sunset paint Pine Lake golden, while loons called across darkening water. The familiar creak of weathered wood beneath us carried the weight of family history we were fighting to preserve. Tomorrow's going to change everything, I told him, the gravity finally hitting home. Dad, when this ends, will you destroy David completely? His moral question hit unexpectedly hard. Despite everything, Tyler's compass pointed true north. Son, David made choices affecting our family, but justice doesn't require cruelty. If he chooses differently, redemption might be possible. What about Bethany? I considered carefully, feeling the smooth texture of grandfather's worry stone in my pocket. Bethany created her own consequences through her actions. She'll face exactly what she's earned. Nothing more, nothing less. Saturday morning dawned crystal clear, perfect for birthday celebrations and better for documenting final harassment escalation. Extended family was arriving, old lake friends confirmed attendance, and I'd strategically mentioned our plans within David's hearing all week. The trap was engineered with surgical precision. Bethany's established pattern guaranteed escalation. Her compulsions were too strong to resist. When she struck, I'd have overwhelming documentation, legal authority, and perfect public venue for revealing exactly whose family she'd been systematically attacking. The sweet taste of approaching victory mixed with morning coffee and crisp lake air as I prepared for the most devastating Saturday of Bethany's life. Every chess piece was positioned perfectly on the board. Time to let the queen destroy herself while the cameras captured every catastrophic move. Friday before Tyler's party, Bethany launched her most desperate assault yet. She filed county zoning violations against our property, claiming unpermitted structures and environmental hazards. The county inspector who showed up that morning carried bad news for Bethany. Mr. Zane, I investigated the complaints, but frankly, I found 3 major violations on the complainant's own property, Inspector Davidson explained. Unpermitted deck extension, illegal hot tub installation, non-compliant decorative fountain. Your property is actually in perfect compliance. The irony tasted sweeter than morning coffee. Will you be citing Ms. Harwick for her violations? Absolutely. False complaints waste county resources, and her own property violations are significant enough for immediate action. That afternoon brought even more desperation. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, knocked with disturbing news. Marcus, that HOA woman approached me with cash, she said, holding 2 crisp $100 bills. Wanted me to sign some petition about your property being dangerous. When I refused, she got very upset. She tried to bribe you? Offered $200 for my signature, said everyone was doing it for community safety. I told her to keep her money and her lies. The woman was literally buying false testimony against my family. But here's where her campaign turned truly vicious. She contacted my ex-wife claiming Tyler was in danger at the cabin. Sarah called me that evening, confused and concerned. Marcus, some woman named Bethany called claiming you're exposing Tyler to unsafe conditions and potential criminal activity. She wanted me to file emergency custody modifications. The metallic taste of rage flooded my mouth. Targeting my relationship with Tyler crossed every line imaginable. Sarah, this woman has been harassing our family for months with completely false accusations. I have police documentation proving every claim is fabricated. I figured that out quickly. She kept insisting Tyler was traumatized by dangerous situations, but when I pressed for specifics, her story fell apart. Then she offered to help me find a lawyer. She what? Offered to connect me with attorneys and pay legal fees if I'd pursue emergency custody. That's when I realized this wasn't about Tyler's safety. She's trying to destroy you personally. Saturday morning arrived with Tyler's family gathering. My brother Tom, sister Lisa, 5 of Tyler's friends. Perfect, legitimate celebration to contrast with Bethany's manufactured crisis. By 10 a.m., Bethany stood on her deck with professional binoculars, phone constantly pressed to ear like military command center operations. At 10:47, first police car arrived for noise complaints about our quiet birthday breakfast. At 11:15, County Inspector Davidson returned for emergency compliance check, and again found 0 violations. At noon, Channel 7 news van arrived. Bethany had called media claiming our dangerous gathering represented HOA enforcement failure. But here's her fatal mistake. She dragged David across the lake to participate in her media performance. Reporter Susan Denver interviewed me about the harassment while Bethany prepared her dramatic entrance with David reluctantly trailing behind. This individual, she announced to cameras, pointing directly at me, refuses community standards protecting everyone's property values. His illegal activities destroy our neighborhood. That's when David saw me clearly for the first time in months of workplace interactions. I watched recognition explode across his face like a detonation. His mouth dropped open, color drained completely, and he stumbled backward. "Bethany," he whispered, grabbing her arm desperately. "That's Zane, from work. That's my direct supervisor." She was too focused on her performance to process his panic. "We demand immediate legal action," she continued for cameras. "This criminal thinks he's above regulations. Bethany, please stop. We need to leave. Now." David's voice cracked with terror. She shoved him away dismissively. "Don't interrupt while I'm handling community business." Susan Denver, smelling the real story, asked the perfect question. "Ma'am, are you aware this gentleman supervises your husband at Pinnacle Regional Industries?" Silence stretched like breaking glass. Bethany's confident expression melted as implications crashed over her. "That's impossible," she stammered. "David works construction. This man is just a neighbor." "Actually, I'm senior construction manager at Pinnacle Regional," I said calmly while cameras captured everything. "David reports directly to me." Her clipboard slipped from trembling fingers, violation notices scattering across our lawn like autumn leaves. David stood frozen between his unhinged wife and his boss, probably calculating how much this public meltdown would cost their family. "David," I said professionally while cameras rolled, "we need to schedule Monday morning discussion about workplace policy compliance." His face went corpse pale. "Yes, sir. Absolutely." The scent of birthday cake mixed with sharp panic sweat as my family witnessed perfect justice unfolding. "Ma'am," Officer Martinez said grimly, "given these revelations, we'll need to review all your recent police reports with the district attorney." Bethany finally found her voice. "This is entrapment." "Actually," I replied calmly, "I planned a birthday party. You planned everything else." The taste of victory was infinitely sweeter than chocolate frosting. Sunday morning brought Bethany's nuclear option. While my family cleaned up from Tyler's successful party, she unleashed every weapon in her arsenal simultaneously. The first wave hit at 9 a.m., 3 police cars responding to emergency calls about noise violations, underage drinking, fire hazards, and illegal gathering permits. Officer Reynolds led the response team, already familiar with Bethany's false report pattern. "Marcus, she called in 5 separate violations this time," he explained, walking through our spotless property. "Claimed you were operating an unlicensed event venue with alcohol service to minors." I handed him photo documentation from yesterday's party. Kids drinking sodas, adults with coffee, birthday cake instead of beer kegs. "Reynolds, she's completely lost control. This is getting dangerous." At 9:30, County Inspector Davidson returned with a full compliance team responding to Bethany's claims of environmental hazards and structural violations requiring immediate condemnation. His inspection was thorough and professional. Every structure passed. Every permit was current. Every safety regulation exceeded county requirements. "Mr. Zane, this is the most compliance-perfect property I've inspected in 20 years, Davidson noted, completing his paperwork. "Someone is clearly abusing the complaint system." But Bethany's masterstroke was still coming. At 10 a.m., Channel 7's news van returned with a full camera crew. Susan Denver had convinced her station this was developing into a major investigative story about HOA abuse and false police reports. That's when Bethany made her final fatal mistake. She arrived with a printed media statement and demanded cameras record her official community safety announcement. But this time, she'd brought reinforcements, David, plus the 3 neighbors she'd apparently bribed with cash payments. Here's the mini twist that sealed her destruction. While Bethany performed for cameras, David spotted my brother Tom and recognized him from company events. "Wait," David whispered loudly enough for microphones to catch. "Tom Zane works in our accounting department. That's his brother. Zane is definitely my supervisor." Bethany spun on him furiously. "Stop undermining my community leadership. Bethany, you've been attacking my boss's family for months. Do you understand what this means for us?" The neighbors she'd bribed suddenly looked very uncomfortable as cameras captured this domestic explosion. "Ma'am," Susan Denver interjected, "can you explain why you've been filing harassment complaints against your husband's direct supervisor without his knowledge?" Bethany's face cycled through confusion, realization, and pure rage. "He should have told me he worked for this criminal." "Actually," I said calmly while cameras rolled, "employees aren't required to discuss their supervisor's personal lives, but they are required to disclose conflicts of interest." David looked like he wanted to disappear into the lake. The bribed neighbors were backing away slowly, probably realizing they'd been recorded accepting cash for false testimony. Susan Denver pressed harder. "Mr. Harwick, did you provide your wife with information about your supervisor's schedule that enabled these harassment campaigns?" David's silence spoke volumes. "Ma'am," Officer Reynolds addressed Bethany directly, "based on what I've witnessed this weekend, you're being charged with filing false police reports, harassment, and conspiracy to commit harassment using inside information." The texture of complete panic spread across Bethany's face as legal reality crashed down. "This is discrimination. He's retaliating because I exposed his violations." "Actually," Inspector Davidson interjected, "our investigation found 0 violations on Mr. Zane's property. However, we did discover multiple unpermitted structures on your property requiring immediate correction." The 3 neighbors Bethany had bribed quietly slipped away while cameras captured everything. Smart people recognize sinking ships before they go under. Tyler emerged from our cabin, drawn by the commotion, and surveyed the scene with teenage wisdom beyond his years. "Dad, is this really happening?" "Son, this is what happens when people create consequences for themselves through their own actions." Susan Denver conducted individual interviews while Bethany paced frantically, phone pressed to ear, probably calling lawyers she couldn't afford. "Mr. Zane," Susan asked on camera, "what's your response to months of systematic harassment from someone whose family's livelihood depends on your professional decisions?" "I feel sorry for David," I answered honestly. "He's a good employee who got caught between his wife's obsessions and his professional obligations. This situation could have been avoided with simple communication." David approached me hesitantly while cameras captured our interaction. Mr. Zane, I'm sorry. I never realized. I thought you were just some neighbor she was having HOA disputes with. I never connected." "David, we'll discuss this properly Monday morning. Bring your union representative if you'd like." The scent of lake water mixed with the bitter smell of Bethany's desperation as she realized her entire campaign had been directed against the person controlling her family's financial security. "This is entrapment!" she screamed at the cameras. "He planned this whole setup!" "Ma'am," I replied calmly, "I planned a birthday party for my son. You planned everything else, including involving your husband's employer in your personal vendetta without his knowledge." Officer Reynolds finished his paperwork while Susan Denver prepared her investigative report. The story was writing itself, entitled "HOA President Destroys Her Own Family's Livelihood Through Systematic Harassment of Her Husband's Boss." Perfect justice, served with professional documentation and media witnesses. The taste of victory mixed with genuine sympathy for David, who'd become collateral damage in his wife's war against reality. Monday night's emergency HOA meeting packed Pine Lake Community Center beyond capacity. Word had spread through social media about Channel 7's weekend coverage, and residents arrived hungry for drama and answers. Bethany stood at the front podium with desperate confidence, flanked by her rapidly shrinking coalition. The Hendersons and Crafts looked uncomfortable, while Mrs. Moretti had switched sides entirely after learning about the cash bribery attempts. Tonight, we address ongoing property compliance issues threatening our community's future, Bethany announced, voice shaking slightly despite her authoritative tone. Behind her, David sat alone in the front row, staring at his hands like a man awaiting execution. He'd spent the day in my office discussing his employment status, suspension pending investigation, and the real possibility of criminal charges for conspiracy. Officer Reynolds attended as community liaison, notebook ready for any additional false statements. Susan Denver's camera crew positioned strategically to capture everything, having smelled the biggest local story of the year. Ladies and gentlemen, Bethany continued, we cannot allow one individual's selfish disregard for community standards to destroy property values that protect all our investments. She'd prepared a PowerPoint presentation titled Protecting Pine Lake's Future, complete with charts showing alleged property value declines and photographs of my non-compliant structures. The presentation was professionally crafted but built on completely fabricated premises. This individual, she pointed directly at me while cameras captured everything, has systematically violated HOA regulations, ignored community standards, and created safety hazards affecting every family here. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Many residents were hearing Bethany's version of events for the first time. Walt stood up slowly, his weathered face grim with determination. Bethany, before you continue, I think everyone should know the complete truth about this situation. Walt, you're out of order, she snapped. I'm conducting official HOA business. Actually, Janet Wilson called out from the back, any member can speak during open community discussion. It's in our bylaws, the ones you wrote. The trap was closing perfectly. Bethany had created the rules that would destroy her. I stood up calmly, carrying my folder of documentation. May I address the community about these accusations? Absolutely not. You're the subject of these proceedings. Susan Denver raised her hand. Actually, ma'am, this is a public meeting. He has the right to respond to accusations. Bethany's confident facade was cracking visibly. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cool evening air. Thank you, I said, walking to the front while maintaining professional composure. I'd like to present some factual information about this situation. Phase 1. Legal Foundation. I displayed the original 1923 property deed and grandfather clause documentation. Every structure on my property predates this HOA by 64 years. We have constitutional protection that no association can override. Phase 2. The evidence avalanche security footage of property vandalism played on the main screen. Bank records showed HOA fund misappropriation for Bethany's personal legal fees. Signed witness statements from the landscaping crew detailed David's involvement in coordinated harassment. The crowd's murmur grew louder as evidence mounted. Phase 3. The connection revelation. Now I need to address a serious conflict of interest that explains this entire situation. I looked directly at Bethany, whose confident expression was melting in real time. David Harwick, your husband, reports directly to me at Pinnacle Regional Industries. I am his supervisor. For 6 months, your harassment campaign has been directed against the person who controls your family's health insurance, mortgage payments, and financial security. The silence that followed felt like vacuum-sealed glass breaking. Bethany's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. Color drained from her face as implications crashed over her. David's head dropped into his hands as cameras captured his humiliation. Furthermore, I continued, while the audience absorbed this revelation, David provided inside information about my work schedule that enabled precisely timed harassment, vandalism, and false police reports. The mic drop moment. Bethany, you've spent 6 months systematically destroying your own husband's career while attacking his boss's family. You've committed harassment, filing false police reports, misappropriating HOA funds, and conspiracy using company insider information. I looked directly at her frozen face. And you've done all of this on television. The community center erupted in conversations. Bethany stood paralyzed at the podium, finally understanding the magnitude of her self-destruction. David, I said formally, your employment status will be determined through proper company procedures, but your suspension continues pending criminal investigation. Officer Reynolds stood up. Ma'am, based on tonight's testimony and previous evidence, you'll need to come to the station tomorrow for formal charges. Walt made the motion everyone expected. I move to remove Bethany Harwick from HOA presidency immediately. Seconded, called Janet. All in favor? The sea of raised hands was overwhelming. Bethany finally found her voice. This is illegal retaliation. You can't do this. Actually, I replied calmly, this is democracy, something you forgot while playing dictator. She gathered her papers frantically and fled toward the exit, David trailing behind like a broken man. The taste of justice was sweeter than victory, because it was earned through patience, documentation, and letting enemies destroy themselves. 6 months later, Pine Lake had transformed from a battlefield into the peaceful community it was always meant to be. Bethany pleaded guilty to filing false police reports and misappropriating HOA funds, receiving 2 years probation and restitution orders. She and David quietly sold their glass mansion and moved to another state, their marriage barely surviving the legal and financial fallout. David kept his job after completing anger management counseling and formal ethics training. We'd had several honest conversations about how he'd been manipulated into betraying professional boundaries. The man wasn't evil, just weak when it came to his wife's psychological pressure. Marcus, I can't apologize enough, he said during our final meeting before his transfer to another department. I never realized how far Bethany's obsession had gone until it was too late. David, everyone makes mistakes. What matters is learning from them and making better choices going forward. Janet Wilson was unanimously elected as new HOA president, bringing dignity and fairness back to community leadership. Her first official act was establishing new bylaws protecting grandfathered properties and preventing future harassment campaigns. Marcus, would you consider serving on the new Community Heritage Committee? Janet asked during our first healthy board meeting. We need someone who understands both property rights and construction management. I accepted gladly. It felt good to help build something positive instead of just defending against attacks. Tyler's confidence had fully returned after watching justice prevail through patience and documentation rather than emotional retaliation. Our father-son bond grew stronger through shared adversity and principled responses. Dad, I'm proud of how you handled everything, he told me one evening while we fished from grandfather's restored dock. You could have destroyed them, but you chose justice instead. Son, that's the difference between revenge and accountability. Revenge consumes you. Accountability teaches everyone. The real victory came through what we built from the ashes of conflict. I established the Pine Lake Heritage Preservation Fund, protecting historical properties from development pressure while creating scholarships for local youth interested in trades and craftsmanship. Tyler became our first scholarship recipient, studying sustainable construction techniques that honored traditional building methods. The annual Founders Day Festival now celebrates our lake's authentic history instead of manufactured property values. Families who'd been driven away by previous harassment campaigns began returning, drawn by news coverage of our community transformation. Property values actually increased once stability replaced chaos. Prospective buyers wanted authentic lake living, not manufactured country club pretensions. Channel 7's investigative series about HOA abuse won regional journalism awards and inspired legislative reforms protecting homeowners from harassment campaigns. Susan Denver still calls occasionally for follow-up stories about positive community change. Officer Reynolds became our neighborhood liaison, helping establish conflict resolution procedures that address disputes before they escalate to harassment. The false police report charges against Bethany became training material for recognizing and prosecuting systematic abuse of emergency services. But the most meaningful change was personal healing. Tyler graduated high school with confidence and purpose, understanding that standing up to bullies requires strategy, patience, and community support. He's studying construction management now, planning to continue our family tradition of building things that last. I started dating Janet after appropriate time had passed. We share similar values about community service and historical preservation. Plus, she makes incredible coffee and actually appreciates grandfather's hand-carved craftsmanship. The cabin remains our sanctuary, but now it's also a symbol of what's possible when people choose cooperation over conflict. Weekend fishing trips with Tyler include teaching neighborhood kids about lake ecology and traditional building techniques. Every morning, sitting on grandfather's porch with coffee and sunrise, I'm reminded that the best victories aren't about defeating enemies. They're about building something better for the next generation. The sound of loons calling across peaceful water no longer carries any edge of menace, just the timeless promise that some things are worth protecting through patience, principle, and community. Pine Lake belongs to families again, not property developers disguised as community leaders. And that's exactly how grandfather would have wanted it.